Every year, my father goes out on a ritual family hunting trip. I've never gone with my dad though, because he's always been a safety net when it comes to me. Something happened to my grandfather that my dad never likes to talk about. Whatever happened, he was scarred so terribly that he even keeps pictures of my grandpa hidden away. The mere sight of his father would send him into a downward spiral of emotion that my mother didn't like seeing. I never asked my dad about it, but after a while I just grew to understand. When it came to the family hunting trip though, I always wanted to accompany my father, hunt by his side and return home with deer meat for the family. We owned a really nice 2-story lake house with a couple dozen acres of land. The same land that would host the annual family hunting trip that I ached to join so badly. My father would continue the tradition by himself in the woods, but we knew he would always come back in the morning. One day though, my father approached me with a freshly cleaned rifle in hand with a crisp new scope. It was a beautiful piece of machinery with custom engravings on the grip tape and all. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this, as my father was trying to push out the words. His eyes were about to water, but he managed to stop the tears in time to ask me, "Would you like to come with me this time?" My jaw dropped to the ground, but I pulled myself together to tell my father I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I replied, excited like a kid on Christmas. It was now my time to bond with my father the way I had always dreamed of. Just me and him, and nobody else to distract us and ruin our good time. This was all like a dream come true, and I threw on my camo hunting gear in no time at all. My father would show a slight endearing smirk as I anxiously got prepared for our trip. When we got ready, we loaded up the truck and rode into the woods of our land. It was like truly experiencing my family's land for the first time ever. Noticing and taking in the beauty of the trees, the rustle of the leaves in the wind, and the dew on the grass. I was covered head to toe in camouflage gear, but my father was adamant about me wearing my safety jacket. It was a neon orange color that you could spot from a mile away so we wouldn't hurt one another. It was also to alert other hunters of our presence in the woods, but our land was stretched so far we never really encountered other people. My father and the rest of the family never saw or heard anyone, and in our town your neighbors might as well be in another county. Everyone is so far away, but sometimes it's nice to be away from civilization. My father told me that it was our chance to connect with nature and the world around us, but without having to be in any town or city. We hadn't seen much game at all, but my father said we had to be patient. It felt like we were there forever in silence, not looking at one another, and just listening. Until we heard some movement near us. We ducked down and looked all around us. Then our eyes caught the sight of a majestic-looking buck. It was running away in front of us, so my father said to follow it and stay close to him. I was right on his heels, as he led the way into the wilderness. I was watching behind us, but when I turned back around, my father was suddenly gone. I didn't hear him rush ahead or anything, but he was totally gone, and so was the buck. I didn't even hear him say a word, and my heart began to sink in my chest. My anxiety began to grow, but I didn't want to shout for my dad because I didn't want to scare the deer away. It would have been really embarrassing for him to bring me out after all this time, just for me to ruin the hunt. I kept running in the direction I saw him, but I wasn't seeing any sign of his neon jacket anywhere. My heart began to pump as fear slowly crept into my brain, infecting my mind with horrible scenarios of what could have happened. It was bad enough being lost in the woods, but now I began to hear something in the distance. Someone or something was coming for me. I I didn't know if it was a deer, or my father, or something dangerous. I readied my rifle on my hip to fire. Whatever it was coming closer and closer. I couldn't see anything around, but I began to move out of there as quickly as I could. I started running like I was on fire towards the house. As I heard my footsteps crunching the leaves beneath me, I heard a second pair of footsteps. I didn't want to stop and make sure to listen because there was no mistake about it. There were heavy footsteps, bigger and louder than mine, chasing me. It wasn't my father, because he would have yelled for me, and he also would have been walking ahead of me. I tried to run faster with my rifle under my arm, but I was running out of breath. I knew that I didn't have much more in me to keep going, because I felt I would have passed out if I had kept on. As I slowed down my pace, I heard the heavy footsteps on the dirt still trailing behind me. It was still going fast and it didn't seem to slow down at all, but it seemed to circle around me. It was running on my side near me, but I still couldn't see it. My eyes were watering as I began to panic and cry, treading for my life, as I could almost feel the urge of what was lurking behind me wanting to pounce on me and maul me to shreds. I grabbed my rifle knowing that I had to face this thing soon, that I wouldn't have a choice. The heavy footsteps went from running next to me to now dashing ahead of me like it was going to cut me off. I still couldn't see anything behind the trees, as there was so much happening in such a short time. In the near distance, I could see an opening of grass and shrubs surrounded by trees. Whatever it was would have to confront me there, as I wasn't going to fall victim to any trap that it planned. I headed right into the circle of grass and readied my rifle's iron sight square ahead of me. At the very same time I did this, whatever it was in the leaves would jump out in front of me. It was a scruffy-looking dirty old man with a rifle in his hand pointed at me. He had white hair with a gray beard and was a really tall, heavy-set guy. He looked at me with a serious face as we pointed our guns at one another. Our standoff would last only a minute, as the old man seemed to notice that I was just a kid. He lowered his rifle and put both of his hands up. With a look of genuine worry and sincere kindness, he spoke. "What are you doing here all alone, kid? You alright? Where are your parents? I'm sure we can find them." There was a flash of light with a bang, and my ears started to ring. The old man's eyes went really wide, and he lowered his hands onto his chest. Blood began to seep out of his chest profusely as he fell to the ground. He was reaching one arm out to me as he clenched his chest, crying, It's okay. It's okay," he said to me as he bled out. I didn't know what to do or what I had done, but my face turned white, and I got dizzy. My heart was racing so fast and I began to shriek in horror. I turned around and ran away as fast as I could, while the man had his arm still reached out to me. I wanted to help the old man, but I was so scared I couldn't stop running away. I kept running and running as fast as my small feet could take me. People must have found the old man, because I heard a group shouting and screaming in panic. I looked back behind me again to see nothing and nobody behind me anymore. I couldn't tell where the yelling and screaming was coming from, but I just turned my head forward and kept going. Even as fast as I was running, I figured someone would catch up to me soon. There were footsteps in the leaves behind me and I could tell whoever found the old man was chasing me. I began to cry like a scared puppy while I ran away from the sounds of angry people charging at me ready to retaliate. I was about to look behind me again to see if they were catching up, but as soon as I turned my neck, I slammed right into the back of someone much taller than me. Someone who was not only taller than me, but outweighed me to the point I felt like I ran into a brick wall. With my hand on my head where it was thumping in pain, I looked up to see who I ran into. My eyes met the frightened look of my father kneeling down to pick me up. He was drenched in sweat, and he was never the type to hug me, but he was squeezing me extra tight. "Oh my God, where were you?" he said as he held me close. I was far too scared from what I had just done, and I know this is so horribly wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him. I just held him back and broke down crying like never before in my life. He asked me what happened and said to tell him what scared me, but I could barely breathe. He just let it all go and said he was happy to have me back. He told me I could talk about it whenever I was ready, and to just come inside for some hot cocoa and supper. I just couldn't do it. All night I tried to confess to my family what I had done, but I was just quiet. My siblings and cousins even asked if I was okay, as they usually teased me when they were together. But this time they let me be, as they could tell that there was something bothering me deep down in the pit of my stomach. My mother thought that I was just going through normal childhood angst, but my father knew what happened after our trip. He asked me to come outside with him while he had a smoke break to talk. I thought he was going to ask me what happened when we got outside, so I just cut him off before he could speak. I told him that I just got lost and that I was just scared. I still couldn't bring myself to tell him what I had done. But if anything, I thought I would wait until the police got me. When the police cars would come with their sirens blaring is when I would tell them, but not until I was pressed against the wall. Instead of pressuring me about what happened though, he just said he was worried about me. Then he told me something that he never told any of my siblings. He told me about what happened to his father, my grandpa. He said because of what happened, it made him overprotective of people he loves. He told me that one day on his father's birthday, they would go on a family hunting trip. Just him and my grandpa, together being men in the wild, while the rest of my family had a barbecue together. He told me that in the middle of the hunt, he lost track of Grandpa and couldn't find him for the longest time. It was as if Grandpa had vanished off the face of the earth. So my dad ran back to tell the family. Then after hours of searching, the family found him, but he was shot in the chest and he was bleeding out badly. My grandpa's brothers went chasing after the culprit, but they said when they got close on the trail, they saw that the person who had shot Grandpa was just a kid. And Grandpa kept telling them in his dying words to not go after the kid, that the child was just scared and made a mistake. My father began crying as he told me the very last sentence my grandpa said before he passed on to the next realm. He said to forgive the boy and let him go. By the time my father was finished telling me this, we were both holding one another, crying so hard that my family came outside. And for the rest of my life, I held this in. Until now.